speaker today is Gary Reeves. Gary has over 5,000 hours. He's an ATP, a Master CFI, II, and MEI. Gary is also an expert in Garmin avionics and ForeFlight. He has instructed over 200 students and is a Young Eagles flight leader. He's also the 2014 Long Beach District Instructor of the Year and FAA Safety Team Member of the Year. There are 97,000 flight instructors in the U.S. Less than 800 have ever been named Master Instructor. California only has 14. And now, please welcome from Big Bear, California, Gary Reeves.
How y'all doing? Thanks for joining me. I know a lot of you are on the East Coast, in Florida, Georgia, and the Southeast. Thanks for staying up. If you need to leave, you'll get a recording link to this tomorrow. But thanks for joining me, and we're going to go ahead and start. Hopefully everybody's comfortable. You have a sock monkey cup with some tea, and let's go ahead and get started. This is sponsored by our organization, pilotsafety.org. It's a group of pilots. We're all volunteers. We have just about 10,000 members, and we hope some of you will join tonight. If you want to be a pilotsafety.org member, it's always free. You just have to answer 3 questions. Do you believe that pilots need to be safe, not just meet the minimum standards? Do you think being safer requires an investment of time and effort to be a better pilot? And do you want to change how outsiders see little planes from being dangerous to fun and safe? I'm actually just going to answer yes for all of you because you're here. You're obviously active in the FAA safety program and you're willing to spend an evening learning more. So hopefully all of you will join, and there's a lot of great benefits. I'm also a lead safety rep for the FAA safety team, and we would encourage anybody who would like to volunteer to join us. You don't have to be an instructor. You just have to care about safety, and we would love to have you. If you have any questions about joining, please let me know. Do need to give you a couple legal notices. ForeFlight is a wonderful company. I'm friendly with the people in Dallas, but they don't sponsor me. They don't support our volunteer group. They have nothing to do with us. And we certainly don't get a commission or any money from people who go out and buy ForeFlight because we say it's wonderful. We do have some class rules for tonight. Number 1, you do not talk about the Flight Club or Garmin, WingX, or Android. If you ask me a question about Garmin, WingX, or Android devices, I don't know. It's not that they're not great programs and products. I just know literally nothing about them. This program is entirely based on the features ForeFlight has. Number 2, this is only the beginning. This is a very brief overview of some of the very powerful features that ForeFlight and iPad can put in your cockpit. It is not a how-to. If you really want to learn how to use the program, you need to spend a minimum of 3 to 4 hours with a professional instructor going through the features, and we'll tell you actually how to find an instructor and to give you some options. But this is not a how-to. This is just a very brief overview of some of the things ForeFlight can do and the minimum equipment we think you should have to get the most out of it. So what this seminar covers, we're going to talk about ForeFlight use on the iPhone and the iPad, but we will not talk about WingX, FlyQ, or Android. We will talk about the minimum equipment you need, but we won't talk about the differences between devices. We will talk about some of the ForeFlight features, but we're not going to teach you how to use them tonight. And we will talk about 2 common mistakes that people get in trouble with quite a bit, but not all 10 of the most common mistakes. I'm going to pause, and this is rule number 3. I'm going to pause twice for questions. So if you have any questions at any time, please use the questions feature. Don't raise your hand, we can't see you. Use the questions feature on your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you do that, when I stop, twice during the presentation, and again at the end. I will answer as many as I possibly can. This really is a free service that we provide for people just like you, and we hope you take advantage of asking me some questions. So why is ForeFlight so amazing? Well, let's talk about the FAR requirements. FAR 91.103 says that you shall have, before beginning a flight, all available information concerning that flight. So can ForeFlight legally replace carrying paper charts, approach plates, and an airport facility directory? Well, sort of. Most of you on tonight's webinar, or if you're viewing this online, are probably not required to have a paper chart at all. Only people who fly large and multi-engine airplanes are required to carry paper charts unless you're going through a special flight rules area. In fact, the FAA cannot even ask to see a current paper chart, an AFD, or anything on a ramp check because there's no regulation requiring it. Again, unless you fly large or multi-engine airplanes, or there are some special exemptions going through a special flight rules area. However, ForeFlight, being a handheld GPS, is a non-issue because the FAA does not regulate and will never regulate or control any handheld GPS or devices. Feel better? But wait, there's more. If an out-of-date chart, no chart, or an out-of-date database in a handheld device like ForeFlight contributed to a condition causing an investigation, it could be used as an additional penalty and enforcement action. I have a good friend who's an inspector out in the Las Vegas region, and he always tells me the same story. Gary, somebody clips Bravo airspace, I go out to visit them and say, hey, don't do it again, and their airworthiness certificate is missing, and their registration's expired, and they have a 5-year-old out-of-date chart. And all of these things add up to additional penalties. So while the FAA does not require most pilots to carry a current paper chart, and they can never regulate having a current database in a handheld device like ForeFlight on an iPad, if you don't have that current information and you get in an airspace violation or in an accident, it's going to count as an additional penalty against you. So, what are the number 3 biggest benefits of having ForeFlight on an iPhone or an iPad? Number 1, you'll always have current charts, and they do count for currency under FAA. Let's talk about just trying to stay current, going to your pilot shop and buying paper charts. Well, a terminal chart is good for 6 months. So twice a year, the FAA updates their terminal charts, and twice a year, they make an average of 100 changes. That can be important. That can be a frequency change or something. Sectional charts, of course, being a VFR product, are good for 6 months. They make an average of 278 changes. AFD, although they do contain VFR information, are primarily an IFR product, so all IFR products are good for 56 days, and there's an average of 825 changes every time they update those AFDs. The TERPs, well, of course, an IFR product, 56 days. There's an average of 75 changes to the terminal procedures. That can be pretty critical. There is an airport near me in Long Beach, California called Fullerton that has recently been NOTAM'd no night approaches. If you don't have that information and you're coming in at night expecting to do the approach, our local TRACON SoCal approach will simply say no. You cannot do the procedure. So, every 56 days, updating these current procedures is pretty important. And of course, the low altitude. By the time you add up all of these changes, the FAA makes an average of 1,361 changes every time they cycle through this stuff. So, trying to stay current by going to a pilot shop and buying all these paper charts is actually more expensive than buying a ForeFlight Pro subscription, which makes it almost automatic to always stay current. The number 2 biggest thing about ForeFlight that I really love for most pilots is it just makes flight planning so much easier. So I'm going to show you very quickly an easy way to flight plan. I'm going to open up my map page and I'm going to put in the tail number of my Cessna 206, November 49er 41 Foxtrot. It's in the top right in that search bar. And then I'm going to put a space and enter 130. Then I'm going to put a space and put 14. Then I'm going to put a space and put 4500. ForeFlight is so smart that you don't have to put knots or gallons per hour or feet. It automatically recognizes any 3-digit number, the 130 as my speed, a 2-digit number, the 14 as my fuel flow, and a 4-digit number as 4500. Even when I was delivering an air coupe to Albuquerque, two digits, I had a 2-digit speed, and it still will figure it out. So it's very, very smart and will do all of this for you. Then I'm going to put a space, and you can see how it automatically calculates those out. I'm going to start at one of my 2 home airports, Long Beach. I'm going to put a space and go to Santa Barbara, Sierra Bravo Alpha, and this will come up. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the Santa Barbara blue button in my flight planning box, and then I'm going to click on Insert Before. So then I'm going to click in this white search box, and before Santa Barbara, I'm going to put SFRA, Sierra Foxtrot Romeo Alpha. This is a custom waypoint that I have already created that will help me identify and show the LAX Special Flight Rules area. Then I'm going to put my finger on the blue line until I get a circle, and then drag it to the Santa Monica Airport and the VOR. Click on Nav, select the Sierra Mike Oscar VOR, and if any of you are familiar with Southern California, I've just drawn in the LAX Special Flight Rules area. This is very accurate. It's more accurate than the VORs, and it's very easy to use for situational awareness. If I zoom out, you can now see my flight plan is pretty much done. And that's exactly how fast and how easy ForeFlight can make flight planning. Now, many people ask me as a master instructor, and I own a flight school, well, you don't let your student pilots, your private pilot trainees use this. Oh, absolutely. From day one, we are using ForeFlight. The practical test standards for private pilot all the way up through airline transport pilot have something called a special emphasis areas section. And you are required to do anything you can to meet these special emphasis areas during the check ride. And one of them is reduce pilot workload. Do you think flight planning this way is easier than doing it on paper? Absolutely. Do you think this meets another special emphasis areas? Situational awareness. Yeah, you got a little blue moving airplane. Pretty hard to get lost. There are many special emphasis areas that ForeFlight actually legally meets as being better than the old-fashioned way. I do want to be very, very clear with everybody that all of my student pilots, and I recommend all student pilots nationwide, you still must learn how to use a manual E6B, a paper chart, and a plotter because electronic gadgets break. Everybody has to know the basics. But on their check ride, from private pilot all the way up through flight instructors that I train, they're using ForeFlight the entire time. Now, please expect the examiner to reach over about 15 minutes into the check ride and turn off your device to make sure you can pull out your paper backup charts and fly still. But this meets the special emphasis areas, and it's actually good on check rides, not bad. And here's the number 3 biggest benefit to using ForeFlight on the iPad, situational awareness. If you see, and here's me from a flight probably a couple months ago, going into my home airport of Big Bear, you see my little blue 206 flying right along the line. You see terrain. It really does make it very, very easy to know exactly where you are. So the situational awareness of a program like this is one of the biggest benefits, especially in an emergency, because you'll always know where the nearest airport is. There are some different options for ForeFlight, and again, please remember we're not supported by ForeFlight. We don't get paid by ForeFlight. I just believe in it. I think it's one of the best programs out there. The basic ForeFlight plan includes the ForeFlight airport directory, and this is an example of what you would see. This is Long Beach. If I clicked on weather, it will show me the current METAR. I can also pull out a TAF and a winds aloft. If I go back, I can click on comments, and this is the comment section out of the AFD, the remarks, or you can click on comments and it will actually pull up comments from other pilots. If I click on FBOs, these are all the current FBOs. Suggestion is that you always call and verify gas prices before you go, but this is one of the best parts if you're going to buy a lot of gas, is you might call Signature Flight Support and say, hey, I'm coming in and I'm going to need 80 gallons of low lead, but JFI Jet Center says they'll do it for $677. Will you beat their price? And it's kind of a neat way to negotiate a lower price, but you do need to be buying somewhat in bulk. Also, you always want to call and make sure they have gas. If we go back to the airport directory, there's actually the AFD built in. So if you want to read the official PDF version of the airport facility directory, it's always in there. So instead of carrying a terminal, a sectional, a low altitude, a set of terminal procedures, and an AFD, you have it all right there in your iPhone or iPad. If I click on procedures, for those of you that are instrument rated, there are all my arrivals. I'm actually going to click on the approach section. Then I'm going to click on my ILS tree 0. And I can pull it up. I can pull it up in my plates view. I can also move it to the map. So this way, as long as my downloads are current, and it will warn you if your downloads are not current, I will always have a nice current instrument approach plate with me. It also has geo-referenced IFR charts and VFR sectionals, and this is the same view. This is me coming back from Central California on an IFR approach, and you can see my little blue plane right here is about to get to this VOR right here. If you wanted to see that on a VFR chart, different view, but that's okay. This is me on another trip, eastbound, just south of Malibu Beach. So again, it's pretty hard to get lost when you have a little blue moving airplane. And geo-referenced, that's what this means. Geo-referenced means little blue moving airplane. And even in the basic program, it will show you terminals and sectionals. Now, a question I get frequently, and I speak all over the country, one of the most common ForeFlight questions I get is, ForeFlight says the sectionals are downloaded, how do I find the terminals? Just zoom in. If you simply zoom in any area that has a terminal map, as long as that state is downloaded or you're connected to the internet at the time, it will change to a terminal view. So the terminals are built in, you just have to zoom in. There's also a huge amount of weather. ForeFlight can make it very, very easy at a snapshot to make a very quick weather decision, but please remember, you are legally required under 91-103 if you're leaving your home airport environment to get a standard weather briefing. ForeFlight can do that for you, but you still have to get that and read and understand it. But ForeFlight does make it super easy just to do some quick snapshots. And I'm going to show you a couple of those quick weather snapshots. So this is VFR and temperature. And you can notice in the upper right corner in Big Bear, it is -3 degrees Celsius. And down in Long Beach, my other home right here, it's 12, while in the bottom left of your screen, it's 6 degrees Celsius in Catalina. They're also color-coded. If you look at something, this is the VFR and visibility chart. So my green arrow is pointed to Burbank, and that is a VFR condition with 10 miles visibility. Whereas if we look at Brackett Airport, that is blue, that is a marginal VFR down to 3 miles visibility. If we went to Big Bear, that's IFR, and you notice Big Bear is showing 1 mile of visibility. And pink is, like at Catalina, really, why are you flying? Pink is low IFR. Planes can't even land. I got to tell you, if you go to an airport that's pink, the pigeons will be lined up for Greyhound. You really should not be flying. If you change it to VFR and pilot reports, this is a great way of looking for turbulence and ice and other conditions along your route. So if I click on an orange one with 3 arrows, that's turbulence. And let's take a minute and read this. It's so funny that every time I do a ForeFlight class, I always get at least 1 to 2 people that complain that I spent too much time on weather because they were there to learn ForeFlight. I can't help somebody like that. Weather continues to be one of the biggest causes of accidents in general aviation, and you are required to know the weather and understand it before every flight under 91-103. ForeFlight makes it very easy to get the weather, but you still have to be able to read and understand it. And if it's been a while since Private Pilot, it's not a bad chance to brush up a little bit. So I'm going to read this to you. Okay? We're going to start right here. UA, an unreliable airman, a pilot, over the 240 radial from LAX 40 miles out. So this is a pilot 40 miles southwest of LAX at 0238 Zulu at flight level 16,000 feet, a Boeing 737, says the temperature aloft was -18 with light chop between 16,000 and 13,000, with trace rime ice between 16,000 and 13,000 during the descent. So it will show you a PIREP, but you still have to be able to decode it. Here's in radar overlay, and if you haven't read radar, it's pretty easy. Green is light precipitation, go. Yellow is caution, let's think about it. Red is stop, and again, pink is really bad. And you notice the blue up here coming towards Big Bear, that's ice and snow. There are a wide variety of weather maps, and all these weather maps are the same ones you get off 1-800-WX-BRIEF or aviationweather.gov. It just is easier to do it all from your hand. So here's a nice graphical AirMet view of IFR and clouds and precipitation. Let's stop at this point, and I'm going to answer a couple questions. If you have a question, remember, do it at any time, and I'll get to it as fast as I can. Phil Gale. Hey, Phil, thanks for joining us. Gary, do you know if ForeFlight covers any other countries, for example, Europe? It does not cover Europe. It does cover Canada and parts of Mexico and the Caribbean. It does not cover Europe yet. Mark, what are the costs? I'm actually going to cover the cost at the end of this, and all of the current costs are always on foreflight.com. Francisco Miranda. Hi, Francisco. Is this app free like Flight Plan? No, it is a paid subscription because it can do much, much more than the free applications. So no, it is a paid app, but its capabilities are much, much greater. Okay, let's continue. Here's ForeFlight Pro. Now, Pro adds some really great features. A lot of people think Pro is only for people that fly frequently or fly IFR. I got to tell you, I actually recommend the Pro version for everybody because it makes it even safer and even better. You can file and brief flight plans straight, including opening and closing flight plans straight from your device. So here's a flight plan from my iPhone 6 that shows that I filed it via Lockheed Martin. Of course, that makes it legal. And what makes a legal filing or a legal weather brief is that they can prove it later. So ForeFlight actually connects directly to Lockheed Martin, which is 1-800-WX brief. So anytime you file and brief anything through ForeFlight, it is absolutely legal because it's recorded. And if you look on the bottom right of my screen, there's a green button where I can actually activate my flight plan before I take off, which is much safer than trying to call a radio once I'm in the air. The less stuff you do in the air, the better you are. So this is a perfect example of why ForeFlight makes it safer. Now my flight plan's been filed, and it'll tell you have a great flight, and that's just absolutely wonderful. But it will then email you a complete legal weather briefing and give you flight notifications. Another great thing about the Pro version is that you get a geo-referenced approach plate and airport diagrams. Please remember, you are legally required to have a current airport diagram out when you're moving a plane at a towered airport. This is not new. 91103 has said that for the last however many years it's been in existence. ForeFlight, the Pro version, actually puts a little moving plane and will warn you visually and tell you if you hook it into your audio panel, warning you're approaching runway 34 left. The nice thing is it'll also show your position on an instrument approach plate. So if any of you fly single pilot IFR, think back to when you were learning, or if any of you are IFR students now, the hardest thing for all IFR pilots to do when they're new is realize where they are in relation to the chart they're looking at. When you see a little blue moving airplane, it takes all the guesswork out of it. ForeFlight and other applications really do make flying IFR and flying in general much, much safer. So I actually like to show you what it looks like when you're flying IFR, and we're going to do an approach into Long Beach. So here's me coming southbound, moving in. You'll see me turn to intercept the final. I'm inside the final, and that's how easy it is. So it's really, really easy to know where you are, especially if you have a problem. Many people in IFR are concerned about a vacuum failure. A vacuum failure is not what kills you. Partial panel flying is pretty easy if you just go straight and level. What kills people in IFR is an electrical failure because they've lost all navigation. If you have ForeFlight, it's pretty easy to shoot a non-precision approach only using that little tablet, which is 100% legal in an emergency. It does require some extra training, however. Nice thing about ForeFlight, remember you are of course legally required to do a weight and balance before every flight. I'm going to assume that out of the couple hundred people we have on tonight, that all of you before every single flight do a paper weight and balance. Well, I actually do now because I don't have to do it on paper. I have pretty close to 6,000 hours. I teach 4 days a week. And I can do a weight and balance in 15 seconds before every single flight using ForeFlight Pro. It just makes it super easy. So I'll put in the pilot and the co-pilot. I'll put in how much gas, and boom. It's just that easy. So the nice thing about ForeFlight, and I'll say it over and over and over, and there are many great programs, I just know ForeFlight, is it makes it easier to be legal and safe. That's why these things are great. Now, we also include a hazard advisor in the ForeFlight Pro version. So I want you to look, my plane is just north of a little pink route. The pink route is the active flight leg, and you'll notice some yellow and red terrain as I approach Big Bear. Now, what's important to understand is that the hazard advisor does not mean you're safe when you see yellow. It is warning you you're in danger, especially in mountain flying. Please do not go into the mountains without hands-on mountain flying training from an expert. I teach mountain flying, and it's critically important that you do mountain flying training hands-on in an airplane before you go. The best in the world is McCall Mountain Flying in Idaho. There's some amazing people in Colorado, but you need to do hands-on mountain training. Nowhere in private instrument commercial flight instructor or ATP is there any mountain training. And being a flight instructor does not make you safer in the mountains. It makes you more dangerous because of overconfidence. You really do need to take a specialized hands-on mountain flying course. But yellow just means you're between 100 and 1,000 of that terrain. Now, if you've taken a mountain flying course, you'll understand that 1,000 foot per minute downdraft in the mountains is not unusual. That does not mean you're safe. It means you need to get out of there unless you know exactly what you're doing. And red, of course, is an emergency climb because you're within 99 feet or actually below terrain. So yellow does not mean you're safe. It means you need to climb or change routes. The nice thing for IFR pilots is you can actually put those instrument approach plates right up overview on the maps. And I always fly IFR on the sectional view because I want to see terrain. But when I overlay my IFR approach plate on top of the map, it makes it even easier. You have a profile view. So when you're flight planning, it's very easy to see how close you'll be within terrain within whatever width of course you select. So it's pretty easy for flight planning to go, oh, okay, and I'll just raise that trip up another 2,000 feet. If you're an IFR person, it's much, much easier before you fly if you highlight and annotate or note on your instrument approach plate. So here's everything I highlight on my approach plates before every single flight. And you'll notice right in the middle for you instrument rated people that I have a big giant T over Zach's because that reminds me to time, which is 3 minutes. It's written directly underneath that. Turn, twist, throttle, talk. So it's really easy to highlight the important information you need before you go, so you don't need to try and brief an approach plate during flight. I teach an IFR Made Easy class for anybody that's interested, and I gotta tell you, briefing an approach plate in the air is way too late. It's about 2 weeks too late. You need to mark up, highlight, and brief all of your approach plates a week before you go. And this is, what makes it very easy to do that. You'll also get flight alerts. So if anything changes after you've already received your standard weather briefing, you'll get a notification direct from Lockheed Martin. So this is a really nice feature. And the last feature of the Pro version is that if you have an iPad, you never have to buy an FAA textbook again. As a master instructor, and I travel frequently, I'm at a national show, it seems like every other month, I get to catch up on my reading while I'm flying because I have every FAA textbook out there on my iPad for free. The Instrument Flying Handbook, the Instrument Procedures Handbook. By the way, if any of you suffer from insomnia, I highly recommend the FAA Instrument Procedures Handbook. I've been trying to read it for 6 years now and have not yet gotten past chapter 3. But if anybody can get to chapter 4 and let me know how it ends, I would love that. So the nice thing is you can always have all of this information with you. You can have a complete FAA library, and you can include other documents that you want to add to yourself. For instance, I always carry the Los Angeles Angels and the Los Angeles Dodgers home baseball schedules so that I make sure I know when sports TFRs are coming even before ForeFlight warns me about them. Now, there is an additional version that you can add to the Pro version, and I think it's another $25 a year, and this is Synthetic Vision. Synthetic Vision is amazing. I will fully admit and apologize to Ryan and Tyson and the amazing people at ForeFlight. When Synthetic Vision first came out, I actually kind of made fun of it for the first couple of days and said, well, no, people need to look outside the window. However, I got to tell you, the first time I used it flying into Big Bear, it was amazing. If you do any night flying, any mountain flying, or any instrument flying at all, it is amazing. They did a wonderful job, and in an emergency can absolutely save your life. However, Synthetic Vision is an additional $25 per year and requires that you buy a $900 GPS called the Stratus 2. So by the time you buy a $900 Stratus and a $500 iPad mini and a $200 per year ForeFlight Pro version with Synthetic Vision, it's still about $50,000 cheaper than putting in a Garmin 600 glass panel system in your airplane. I think it's worth it. I think it's totally worth it. And it is amazing. But if you are a day VFR only pilot, I don't think you probably need it. But do remember, it does require the $900 Stratus 2 GPS, but it is very, very good. So on the far left, you can see a hill, which is the Palos Verdes Hill. In the middle, you can see that same red hill to the left of my ground speed of 92 knots. And on the far screen, you can see that hill off on the sectional. The Synthetic Vision with the Stratus 2 AHRS is very good. Now, this Synthetic Vision does not have the Stratus 2. It just has any built-in or external GPS, and it will give you ground speed, altitude, a vertical speed indicator, a ground course, and a course line. But what it doesn't give you is the actual attitude information in the back, like a full G1000 display. I've now added the Stratus 2, and it is really amazing when you see the full Synthetic Vision capabilities. All right, this is a good time to stop and answer some questions. Del Renfro, hey Del, can I further explain the process of activating a flight plan through ForeFlight? Yes, once you create a flight plan, there's a button that will send it to File and Brief. After you file it, if you have the Pro version, it will then open up 4 buttons so that you can amend, cancel, brief, or activate the flight plan, but it does require you to have cell data capability or to be on the internet when you do so. Mark Elsing, how do I force ForeFlight to use Lockheed instead of DUATs to file? I like to open and close flight plans from ForeFlight, but it doesn't always seem to work. That's actually pretty easy, Mark. Go into settings and delete your DUAT or DUAT sign-in. Francisco, hi Francisco, do we need an antenna or any other device on the airplane to be able to operate this app either on the iPhone or the iPad? I do recommend that you always use an external GPS antenna. The GPS built into an iPhone or built into an iPad with a cellular data contract is not a real independent GPS. It's called an AGPS or an assisted GPS, which means to find its initial position, it has to talk to 3 to 4 cell phone towers first. So if you lose your position, you lose the signal, or you don't turn it on until you're above 5,000 or 6,000 feet, you will probably never regain it. There are many external GPSs. I have a link to all of them on our website, and they range from $99 all the way up to the $900 Stratus 2. Bob, I have an iPad mini with a Retina display and Verizon LTE. However, it only has 16 gigabytes. Bob, I will talk about at the end. I do recommend a minimum of 32 gigabytes memory to use ForeFlight, but it just depends on what other applications you use and how big an area you fly. If you're going to stay inside one state, you can probably be okay with 16 gigabytes, but the next time you buy one, I would buy at least 32. Mark has the best question I have ever been asked. Mark Hammer, you are my hero. I'm going to send this to Tyson and Ryan at ForeFlight tonight as soon as I get off. Mark has a feature request. ForeFlight would you please order me a hamburger at the destination before I land? I'm going to send that to them. That is absolutely awesome. So excuse me just a second. I want to take a picture of that so I can email it to the guys in Texas. That's awesome, Mark. Not yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if it can actually cook it in the next update. Phil, you brought up something interesting that I do want to talk about, and this is Phil Gale. Hi, Phil. For IFR, will it auto-select a suitable route? It will pull up previously filed and recommended routes. However, please be very careful that your airplane is equipped to do that. It is notorious in Southern California for pre-selecting a tech route, a tower and route control route. It's in a heavy training environment that is pre-programmed for jets, not for piston aircraft. So people pre-select routes that they're not qualified to. So although it will recommend IFR routes, it's still your responsibility to make sure that you're capable of making all of the climb and performance gradients. So let's talk quickly about some comparisons. An iPod Touch will cost you about $250. An iPhone 5S, about $600. An iPad 2, $500 to $600, and an iPad Mini, $300 to $500. I just bought the new iPad Mini 3. I think I spent $600 or $700, but it has 128 gig. It's very fast. You really do need an external GPS with any of them to be the most effective. However, of course, with an iPhone 5S, you're probably going to have a monthly data bill where if you stay low level, the built-in assisted GPS may work well for you. So do you get the iPad with the cellular data plan or just the Wi-Fi? I actually recommend that you get the cellular version, but you don't activate the contract because that way you have the built-in assisted GPS, but you don't need to sign up with a provider and you don't need to pay a monthly bill. However, it is $100 extra. So the downside of having a Wi-Fi only is, of course, you need internet to connect for filing and briefing. But if you have your cellular and you leave it on, it drains very, very quickly, especially if any of you go in the flight levels. Anytime you get up over about 16,000 feet, anything with cellular left on will drain the battery very quickly, almost within an hour, because it's constantly looking for new cell towers and you're going so quickly. So I don't actually prefer the cellular ones in flight. I turn those off and just leave it on Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to connect to my external GPS. Do I prefer the iPad mini or the iPad 2? Honestly, you all, I much prefer an iPad mini. I think it's smaller and easier to fit in the cockpit, either on a yoke mount or in my Cessna 206. I actually have it on the panel. I have a RAM mount that fits very nicely on my panel. The iPad 2 seems a little big to me in the cockpit, but I think this is very much just personal preference. Here are the 3 external GPS devices that will work with ForeFlight. One is a dual. Dual meaning that it can talk to an Android or an iOS and Apple device. A Bad Elf and a Stratus. Both the Bad Elf and the Dual connect via Bluetooth technology. The Stratus actually connects by a Wi-Fi connection. Now, it does not provide you internet, but it does connect to your device via Wi-Fi. This is actually the panel in my 206, and you can see how I have an IFR certified antique Garmin 300 GPS to make me legal, a KX155 radio, and a really nice iPad mini that now has the Stratus 2 and AHRS. And of course, this has been upgraded. I actually have the Stratus 2 now. Do I still carry paper backup charts? Yeah, although my LA terminal and my LA sectional may be 6 months or a year out of date, it doesn't matter because I have current charts. I do carry a current paper chart for every instrument approach plate I'm going to need, just in case something breaks. I'm very much a backup guy. Now let's take just a few minutes and talk about Stratus and ADS-B, because with the Stratus 1 or the Stratus 2, you get ADS-B weather and some traffic, sort of, but I do really need to explain some limitations. ADS-B traffic is great if your aircraft has ADS-B out or you're very close to another one that does, and you're in communication with an ADS-B ground tower. So almost anywhere in the United States, you're going to be in contact with an ADS-B tower if you're any kind of near a populated area. But unless your airplane has ADS-B out, you will not get any traffic at all, or if you're very close to another one that does. So you are the Cessna right here in the middle of the screen. You are inside of a ring of a twin engine that has ADS-B out. You will now see both of them. The twin engine with ADS-B out, if you look at your traffic display in the bottom left, is 800 feet taller than you, higher than you, and there's his tail number. Then you're going to see a Mode C airplane coming towards you that's 200 feet below you and climbing. What you don't see is the Mode C airplane coming up behind you at your 6 o'clock. So ADS-B traffic is good if your airplane has ADS-B out or you're very close to another one that does. But it is not perfect, and that's why I recommend on every single flight you still get flight following. Now, the great thing about Stratus is you do get some ADS-B weather, but there are some limitations. ADS-B weather is never real time. There are always built-in delays. So if you're trying to use ADS-B weather or XM weather, for that matter of fact, to try and dodge thunderstorms, that is a very, very bad idea. There can be delays of up to 23 minutes, especially on radar and thunderstorm activity. So it is great for long-range weather planning, but if you're looking for an instant live weather update, it's not a good idea. Now here is a view of the Stratus with the AHRS, meaning I get the complete attitude and heading reference system, not just the heading and reference. So this is me coming out of Big Bear a couple weeks ago. Now the difference is everything is GPS based. So you'll notice my speed is not an airspeed, but a ground speed. My altitude is a true altitude or a GPS altitude. My heading is not actually a heading, but a ground track. However, you can see I'm in about a 10-degree climbing right turn that is very accurate. So if you're flying IFR or VFR flight following, which you always should, and your Stratus or your L4 dual GPS on ForeFlight says you're at 10,000 feet, and your altimeter says 9,500, which one should you fly when talking to air traffic control? You should fly your altimeter. Okay, this is a great backup in an emergency, but you should always fly your gauges. This is a backup. This is a nice view of me with the AHRS doing an instrument approach into Snoopy, Santa Rosa Airport, which is the Charles Schulz Airport. And you can really see how useful it is because not only does it show me leaving the Pigpen final approach fix, and I'm doing a circle to land, but it shows traffic and terrain, and it is an amazing, amazing tool. Here are some accessories that I recommend, and all of this stuff, everything we recommend is actually on our website, pilotsafety.org. There's very easy links. You can go right to the products. So pilotsafety.org, all this stuff is listed. I do want to point out that Scotia power plug in the middle. It's very important that you do not take the power plug from Radio Shack and put it into an airplane. Airplanes are not 12 volts. They are 14 volts all the way up to 28. And I will tell you from experience, when you plug an iPhone 5 with a car charger into a Cessna Caravan, it very quickly melts the iPhone. So please don't be like me. Please don't melt your iPhones. Please make accessories that can handle the wide selection of voltage possibilities. So let's look at the cost of charts for LA and San Francisco. $26 to stay current with terminal charts, $36 to stay current with sectionals, another $42 to stay current with AFDs, another $42 to stay current with TERPs, and another $42 to stay current with low altitude maps, for a total of $188. Or I could get ForeFlight Pro with a synthetic vision for $199 and just be done. I gotta tell you, it's just easier to buy the ForeFlight programs. These prices may have changed recently. Please always go to foreflight.com for more information on those prices. But you can see why I recommend just from an economic standpoint. So a Garmin 430 WAS, which is about $10,000 to install right now, will charge you $350 per year to keep the IFR database current. A Garmin 696, which is a beautiful handheld device, is $1,700 but costs you $450 per year to keep the databases current. An iPad mini with a Stratus will cost you $1,400 and $199 per year. That's why I think ForeFlight is the really best option. There are some common mistakes to avoid, and I teach a class called the 10 most common FAA violations and iPad accidents. You can find that on our website. But the two most common mistakes are that people use these handheld devices to get way too close to airspace, and they're picking up airspace violations. Most airspace violations actually happen to IFR pilots that fly VFR, but ever since ForeFlight has come out and other handheld technologies, the FAA in some regions has seen a 10 times increase in restricted Bravo and Charlie airspace violations than ever before. And that's because your handheld device like ForeFlight is much more accurate than the FAA radar. So this is a pretty common course here in Southern California from Orange County down to San Diego, and people will plot their course just inches outside these restricted airspace. The problem is that FAA radar is so inaccurate that they only know where you are within about 1 mile of your actual position. For those of you who are instrument rated, you might recognize minimum lateral separation between two IFR targets is always 2 miles, and that's why. The FAA radar is grossly inaccurate. It's still vacuum tube technology in some places, and it only shows your current position within 1 mile. So if you use ForeFlight and you go 4 inches outside the restricted area, the FAA radar might actually paint you as inside that restricted area. And that triggers an automatic violation. You don't get the call the tower thing anymore. You're actually just going to get a letter 2 to 3 weeks later. We have a radar track of showing you violating a restricted airspace, and we'd really like to talk to you. The biggest mistake, however, is using ForeFlight or any new handheld technology without taking expert training first. I can't imagine anybody I know anywhere in the country, and I know thousands of pilots and I meet thousands of pilots at the shows every year, would tell anybody, no matter how good a pilot they are, that they could figure out how to fly a glass panel G1000 airplane the first time alone just by doing it. Unfortunately, that's how 99% of people use ForeFlight and WingX, is they download it and they try and figure it out by themselves. This is a really bad idea, and it's one of the biggest reasons we have so many airspace violations and we're seeing an increase in accidents. It is an advanced technology, and just 2 or 3 hours with a professional instructor who's good at this will eliminate all of your problems. So yes, the owner's manual is there and you should read it. But any new technology, spending just even 3 hours with an expert instructor will save you hours of heartache and FAA investigations, and it really is worthwhile. So how do you find an expert instructor in your area? Well, if you're in Southern California, hey, my name's Gary and I'm happy to help. If you're not in Southern California, You can certainly tune in on my webinars and DVDs and that kind of stuff. And if you'd like hands-on training in your area, go to masterinstructors.org. Master Instructor is the highest ranking instructor out there. I'm happy to be one of them. Call a master instructor in your area and ask if they're good at ForeFlight. Or call your local flight school and see if you can find an instructor who is an expert at ForeFlight. How do you know they're an expert? Real simple, ask them 3 questions. How long have you used ForeFlight? If they've used it less than 2 years, they probably don't fly with it very much. Ask, do they teach their private pilot students to use it? If they're not comfortable enough to teach student pilots how to use it, they're probably not comfortable enough to know it. And ask how much actual IFR and night time they have with it. If you ask those 3 questions, you'll do very well in picking an instructor for yourself. Remember, if you don't learn a lesson at the right time, life will always teach you those same lessons at the wrong time, unfortunately with these devices, usually in the terms of an FAA investigation. So learn your equipment with an expert before you fly alone. So how to start learning, just like I said, read the pilot's guide, attend classes and webinars, and get some hands-on training. If any of you are interested, one of our sponsors, Sunset Flying, is actually offering 2 separate webinars this Saturday. They are $99 each, or I think you can do both for $149. You can find all this information later on our website, pilotsafety.org. But these are actually 4 hours long each. They go very slow, and you will do all of these steps with the instructor online. They're very small classes, and you'll actually do step by step every single thing. And this is more convenient for most people than going to an instructor. So if you'd like more information, that's on our website. If any of you are in the Florida area, would you come by and say hi? I'm a national speaker. I get to speak at many shows this year. And the best part of every convention, if you ask my wife, is when people come up to me and say, hey, I was on your webinar. So we'll be at Sun and Fun. I'm actually teaching 4 free classes, including on Wednesday, 10 ways your iPad can cause accidents and FAA violations. The most common pilot mistakes, I'll be teaching mountain flying and IFR made easy. And I'll be there. If you bring your iPad up to my booth in the Southwest area, I'll answer as many questions as you want for free. So come visit us at Sun and Fun this year. Need some more help? Go to pilotsafety.org. You'll notice some really neat stuff on pilot safety, including a tab just about ForeFlight with some free videos and some free pointers and links to other classes. Okay, at this point, I'm going to stop and answer some questions, as many as I can. Gladys, hi Gladys. Can my ForeFlight app subscription also be used on smartphone and another iPad? It is actually limited to 3 devices. You can have it on an iPhone, an iPad, and a backup iPad. So that will work very nice for you. Jeff Rexford, do you need the cell service for radar overlay? You either need to be connected to cellular data, the internet, or to have a Stratus to get radar overlay in flight. David, I think I just answered that question. The cost does include up to 3 devices, an iPad, a backup iPad, and an iPhone. Peter, are there any tricks, shortcuts to pull up the ATIS or tower frequencies in ForeFlight when en route? Absolutely, buddy. Just touch any airport and touch info, and everything will pop right up. Y'all, I really want to thank you so much for coming. If I missed your question or didn't get to it, please email me anytime. Gary R. Golf Alpha Romeo Yankee Romeo. Gary R. at pilotsafety.org, or come on pilotsafety.org, and there's an Ask the Expert feature. You can ask us questions all you want. There are a couple more questions, and I will try and answer them. I'll say as long as my voice holds out. If you need to go, thanks for coming. Immediately after this live presentation ends, within about an hour, you'll get a link to a survey. And then after completing the survey, you'll get a link to a bunch of free safety downloads. Bruce, hi Bruce. In my 206, I have a Garmin 300 for legal approaches, but do I actually use ForeFlight as your approach navigator? I use ForeFlight for my instrument approach plate, but my primary source of navigation is always the certified Garmin 300. Stuart, will the program ever be compatible with Android devices? Stuart, I don't believe so. I don't think that's just ever going to happen. Many people are saying thank you. Thank you to you guys for showing up. And again, I really appreciate you all being the pilots that care about safety enough to hang out on a weeknight for an hour of your free time. Thank you so much. For more information on everything, please visit pilotsafety.org and join as a free member.